Now, live from WKYC Studios, this is What's New.
Happy Monday, everybody. Thanks so much for watching What's New on this Monday afternoon. Jay and I are back together again. And Jay, it's great to see you.
Betsy, it's great to see you. It's been 2 weeks, but I don't know about you. For me, it feels like 2 months.
Yeah.
So it is great to be back with you again, Betsy, and very good to be back on What's New. If I look older, Betsy, by the way, it's because I'm a grandfather now.
Yay.
So, and it happened last week, and I'll share pictures later, I promise. But first, there is so much going on in this world of ours right now, and we need to jump right in. And we start with news from the family of George Floyd. They are now demanding a first-degree murder charge against the officer accused of killing him. This after their independent autopsy found Floyd's death was, in fact, a homicide caused by asphyxia due to sustained pressure on his neck. The official autopsy, though, released last week, blamed his death on the combined effects of being restrained, possible intoxicants, and underlying health issues. That one ruled out asphyxiation. In the meantime, President Donald Trump unloaded on many of the nation's governors today, this following a weekend of protests, many of which turned ugly. The president saying of the governors, they are weak and fools. He encouraged them to use stronger police tactics, arrest more people, and, quote, put them in jail for 10 years. All of this, according to a person who was on that call. Here, the city of Cleveland remains under a curfew until 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Large portions of the city are currently off limits, and all businesses in those areas have been ordered closed. People who live in the curfew zone can get in and out of the area as long as they have proper identification, but the city has restricted walking to those who need to take the dog out, go to a medical appointment, or buy food. The curfew area includes the Central Business District as well as the West 25th Market District. By now, you've probably seen video of the looting and destruction in downtown Cleveland after peaceful protests over the weekend to protest the death of George Floyd turned violent. Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson and Police Chief Calvin Williams say they did the best they could to control the situation. But 3 News investigator Rachel Polanski talked to business owners and leaders who question why the city wasn't better prepared.
Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson said that the city handled Saturday's events well. Even though storefronts were shattered, multiple buildings were vandalized, and some businesses were looted.
Did we expect or desire a better outcome? Yes. What happened happened. And our people, our police officers stepped up.
So should the city have been better prepared? Cleveland City Councilman Mike Polenzek says yes.
I think that's very clear to all.
He's right. I was there too. There was a large police presence at the Justice Center. But when we got to Euclid Avenue, there were no police in sight. And let's not forget, there were warnings ahead of time. Days of violent riots have been erupting across the nation, even just down the road in Columbus.
You have to hope for the best and plan for the worst.
And coming up, we'll have more from a Cleveland business who said that City Hall failed us. That part of the story at 6 o'clock. Rachel Polanski, 3 News.
Well, at least 66 people were arrested during Saturday night's protests, and there's been a lot of speculation over whether most were from here or from somewhere else. Well, we dug into the arrest records today and found out those reports about out-of-towners stirring up the violence may not be true. In fact, according to Cuyahoga County records, no one arrested over the weekend lives out of state. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't out-of-towners in the crowd. So when it comes to who started the violence, protesters say it was the officers in an attempt to disperse the crowd. But Cleveland Police Patrolman President Jeff Fulmer claims that's not the case.
It was obvious. I mean, they had a goal. They had a goal to come into Cleveland and destroy it. And it's obvious when you look around at the downtown and everything else, everything was destroyed. I mean, this wasn't come yell at the police and then leave. This was start a car here on fire, smash some windows, start a car here on fire. This was an attack on Cleveland throughout the downtown, which makes no sense at all.
Well, Fulmer said previous protests in Cleveland have remained very peaceful. He says he's been in the middle of other protests, including those over the death of Tamir Rice. We'll have more on this story tonight at 6 on What Matters Most, including the perspective from a former Justice Department official whose job it was to mediate the protests during the Vietnam War. So I think a lot of this would bring up the question, what would you do? What would you say to Cleveland? And we actually have an opportunity for you to participate in that. This is our 3 News app. It's a newer version than previous ones you may have seen. But if you scroll down, you're looking for this orange section right here. What's your message for Cleveland? You could send us a video on this. We have this cool new feature. It allows you to easily send videos and photos to us. So you go to the app, you'll see this orange box, and it'll walk you right through the process. You basically just select a photo or a video that you've taken on your phone and you send it in, and the best ones will be used on WKYC.com and right here on the air. And we'd love to show some of your messages out of hope and encouragement for the land. So the 3 News app is a pretty handy tool to have for a whole bunch of different reasons, but now you have much more interactivity with it. And we'd like to hear what you have to say for sure. Well, in the midst of all the protests, we're also facing this whole health pandemic. There are now 35,984 cases of coronavirus here in Ohio, a day-to-day increase of 471 cases. Now, it's 8 fewer than the new cases reported yesterday. That is a decline, no matter how small, we're going to take it, it's a decline, but some worry that it won't last because of all of the protests. So Dr. Kavita Patel, an NBC News medical contributor, joins us live from Washington, D.C. now. Dr. Patel, many protesters here in Cleveland and around the country, they wore masks. Some were able to spread out, others were in pretty close proximity to each other. So how does that play into concerns that the protests can cause a rise in coronavirus cases?
Well, it is concerning. It is a bit of a recipe for an increase. The close quarters, shouting, where we know that the respiratory droplets can travel a little further in the air. And as you mentioned, not everyone is wearing a mask. So that can be a cause for concern. We'll see it over the next 5 to 14 days if that bears out.
So 5 to 14 days, that window that we need to keep an eye on. And you mentioned all the shouting and the chanting. So there's a higher risk of spreading the virus than during normal conversations and social distancing, I'd have to assume.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And keep in mind that I think what we have to do on the public health side is make sure that we have testing and tracing and some of those measures that we know can work even when we have an environment like we do today with people crowded together or shouting or not wearing masks.
All right, so what should people do if they were at one of the protests and now they're worried they might have been exposed to the virus?
It's a great question. So it can take several days for one of these tests that we do in the mouth or in the nose to show up positive. So I think that if you were there and you are concerned, first and foremost is try to kind of keep yourself isolated or at least away from people that might be high risk, people of a certain age, other chronic conditions. That would be the first thing. And then the second would be to try to understand where you can go to get tested. And I would recommend waiting. Again, unfortunately, you would have to wait a couple of days and in the meantime, try to isolate, but try to find out where you can get tested nearby for one of those swabs, mouth or nose.
All right, and last question, Dr. Patel. It seems the coronavirus has really been hitting in the African-American community particularly hard. So public health officials are worried about the mass gatherings and the number of people all coming together, all races. So how can public health departments help ease the impact on vulnerable communities?
It's a great question and one that we're all asking ourselves and should be asking around the country. First, you have to look at why does this affect people of color in a different way, and a lot of it has to do with kind of socioeconomic determinants, people who have been affected, lower income, and then you also have to look at issues around healthcare access. Even when you know you might be sick, it's harder to get care, as well as the fact that we have a lot more communities of color in these essential worker functions. And so those are kind of 3 different reasons. And as public health officials, again, we need to make sure that access is easy. We have to also make sure that we understand our own implicit bias when we're taking care of people and why we might treat people of color differently and recognize that. And then third, we have to do more to make testing and some of those other measures that we know work more readily available, which candidly we weren't several months ago.
Definitely. All right. Dr. Kavita Patel, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Well, Cleveland lawmakers are pushing an effort forward to declare racism as a public health crisis. Romney Smith has more on these efforts.
Today, a lot of people are discussing what action steps can be taken to right the wrongs of racism. And today, we learned that there are several local efforts. Now, the resolutions to legally declare racism a public health crisis are in part inspired by this weekend's protest to honor the life of George Floyd. Representative Juanita Brent signed the resolution that would designate racism a public health crisis. The resolution points out the inequities in multiple areas from healthcare to education to housing and more. And this morning, the Cleveland City Council had a 2-hour-long Zoom discussion about it, mostly agreeing that the next step is action.
We are here to join hands with you as we move forward and look at policies, look at resources, look at strategies so that we can improve the health conditions in our community, for our community, across our community.
If either resolution is signed, it will be the first of its kind in Ohio. I'll have even more tonight at 6 o'clock. Back to you.
All right, Romney, thank you very much. Time now to get a check of other headlines making news today here at 5 o'clock. And for that, we go back to our WKYC studios and say hello to Russ Mitchell. Hi, Russ.
Hey, Jay. Welcome back. It is great to see you.
Thank you.
Another night of protests in the nation's capital to tell you about today. Fires were set within view of the White House, including a small National Park Service building in Lafayette Square. And a second fire was set in the basement of St. John's Church, also known as the Church of the Presidents. U.S. Marshals and DEA agents were sent in to help police with security. President Trump was briefly moved to an underground bunker. Former President Obama is calling for peaceful protests. In a piece published by the media, he called for those who want to bring real change to both protest and cast ballots, adding that violence should not be excused or rationalized. And check your bag and your temperature. Beginning today, Frontier Airlines will not let you fly if your temperature is above 100.4. The airline will check all passenger and crew temperatures before boarding. Frontier is the first airline to add this requirement here in the U.S., and you got to think there'll be more to come. JLC at 5:30.
Russ, we'll see you then. Thank you very much. Straight ahead on What's New, we are living through times like we've never seen before. National unrest in the midst of a global pandemic. We'll talk with NBC's Alice Barr about what President Trump is pushing for to end the protests on the other side of the break. And Stephanie Haney has what's clicking in Cleveland on this Monday afternoon. Hey, Steph.
Jay, Miles Garrett has a powerful message following this weekend's protests in downtown Cleveland, and we have what you need to know about closures related to that curfew. Now over to Matt Wentz. Matt, how's the weather looking?
Hi there, Steph. Our weekend refresher is over. We've got humidity and some showers and thunderstorms that'll build back into the forecast. We'll detail the timing and the next 7 days coming up.
Sure. And you guys are doing my package or not? Okay. And is there a Q&A afterward? I just noticed I didn't
Welcome back to What's New. As countless businesses were destroyed and buildings burned, some are upset with how President Trump is handling the nationwide protests. On a call with governors earlier today, the president called for more force to end the violent protests. Alice Barr joins us now from Washington, D.C. Alice?
Yeah, Jay, President Trump no doubt has seen and heard these protests outside the White House over the past several days, and that is really just a microcosm of the pain and the rage that are gripping this country.
As grief and boiling anger over police killings of black people seize cities from coast to coast, President Trump today demanding governors use force to take back the streets. Sources who listened to a video teleconference telling NBC News the president told governors, quote, "Most of you are weak," urging them to dominate and make more arrests. The comments echoing the president's weekend tweets, deriding Democratic leaders while pushing for law and order. Critics asking why the president has yet to formally address the nation days into this crisis.
We need the president to address this issue, to acknowledge that systemic racism is now and has been a problem in America.
For 3 days now, protests have raged outside the White House. The fires and flashbangs giving President Trump an up-close view of the turmoil across the country and briefly forcing him into an underground bunker Friday night. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser imposing a 7 p.m. curfew after nearly 90 people were arrested yesterday when peaceful protests gave way to chaos and looting overnight.
Smashed windows and looting are becoming a bigger story than the broken systems that got us here.
President Trump's presumptive Democratic rival, Joe Biden, meeting with supporters in a Delaware church today and holding a virtual roundtable with mayors.
Well, people are angry. We need that anger. We need that to compel us to move forward.
Calls for action across a divided nation, insisting that only understanding the source can extinguish the flames.
The protests have really taken focus off of coronavirus, and medical experts are worried that these days of mass gatherings could lead to devastating new cases of the virus. Jay?
Alice, certainly that is a legitimate concern. Before we let you go, Minneapolis has obviously been the epicenter of these protests. I know that the family of the deceased actually had a second autopsy performed, and the results of this one were different. The first one showing no asphyxiation. This one comes back with a different result. Any idea at all how that might impact either a change of charges here or perhaps future protests?
Yeah, that is a serious question, having that conflict between the two autopsies that have been revealed. Certainly the call in Minneapolis is still to have all 4 of the officers that were involved all charged, and the family has said they would have liked to see higher charges against the main officer who had his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. So it's a question remains to be seen what change that might have, because protests had kind of been winding down there even as they were ramping up in other parts of the country. Potential that this could shift the picture yet again in that tumultuous city of Minneapolis.
All right, Alice Barr with us tonight from Washington, D.C. Alice, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Well, let's change gears now and turn to the weather. And Matt Wentz, I'm not sure we could have had a more beautiful weather day. To me, this was as close to perfect as you could get. I'm going to make your weather word difficult, though. I'm going to give you as your weather word today, improvement. So if you can, try to come up with an improvement on what we had today. I'm getting greedy, Matt, I know.
Jay, it's okay. Listen, I'm up for a challenge, especially being off for a week. So I definitely appreciate that. It's hard enough just to connect to the internet, but improvement, we can do that. Not weather-wise, right, but we'll work that into the forecast. And Jay, heartfelt from my entire family, congratulations, Grandpa Jay. We are so proud of you. You're going to be a wonderful grandpa. I'm sure you've been planning this. So good stuff. All right, let's talk May. It is now June 1st, so we close the book on May. What a wild month we had, right? We had a below average start, a below average middle, and then we went to the above average temperatures towards the latter half of the month. Overall, when we talk about high temperatures, we had 15 days above average, 16 below. And the reason why I never use the word normal, because we had 0 normal days, right? It's never normal. It's never average. It's either above or below, at least most of the time. And temperatures today, as Jay mentioned, it's just perfect outside. These are thermostat settings. We're in the low to mid 70s, a little bit cooler near the lakeshore. But the thing that's making it so comfortable outside, we've lost that humidity. Dew points, when they get up into the 50s, you start to feel it. 60s, that's when we call it humid. This is another incredibly dry air mass we have. Dew points in the 30s right now. There's hardly any moisture. You go out for a run tonight, you're not even going to sweat no matter how hard you work, because this dry air continues to come in for Canada. But this time of year, that humidity is not far off. Look down to our south and the west. We've got humid air that's going to work in here over the next 24 hours. Big picture looks like this. You don't see a whole lot of clouds around right now, but we have high clouds working in from the west. That should make for a nice sunset. So all you sunset buffs, get the camera ready. I think we'll have a nice one tonight. You can see showers and thunderstorms not far off in areas of the north woods of Wisconsin and up towards Marquette. The bigger picture, though, we've got a dome of heat out in the plains. We've got showers and thunderstorms that rotate along it. This is a typical summertime pattern. We call it the ring of fire, where you get thunderstorms that pop where that warmer air meets the cooler air. And we're going to be right on that boundary over the next couple days. So we'll have these periods of showers and storms with many dry hours in between. National Design Mart hour by hour forecast. You can see a little bit of an improvement overnight tonight, with temperatures will be a little bit warmer, up near 60. I think tomorrow morning we may have some leftover showers, maybe a rumble of thunder. The best chance is north and east. I think most of us are dry. By afternoon, we're looking great. But then Wednesday, things start to change. Universal Windows Direct 7-day forecast. You can see scattered storms in the forecast on Wednesday. Some of those could be strong as a cold front moves through. Cooler and drier on Thursday, and then back into the weekend. It looks like another refresher after some Friday storms. 70s, low humidity. I think we'll take it. So you guys excited about that forecast? Just say yes. There it is, delayed, Jay. That's not a delay. That is the delay here. So back to you.
That's okay.
Thanks.
You got the jump. By the way, I need plans to that beautiful playhouse that you have over your right shoulder. We'll talk off the air. After a quick break, we're checking in with Steph to see what's clicking in Cleveland. She has what Myles Garrett is saying about the protests.
Yeah. Betsy, this is what's clicking in Cleveland. Defensive end Myles Garrett went to social media.
All right, everybody, now it's time to see what is clicking in Cleveland with our digital anchor, Stephanie Haney. And Stephanie, Miles Garrett is now speaking out about the protests surrounding George Floyd's death.
That's right, Betsy. Cleveland Browns defensive end Miles Garrett spoke very candidly on social media about the protests, calling for accountability for everyone involved. It was a long post, and in it he talked about men and women of color protesting peacefully, writing that in some cities it's being met with patience and understanding, and in others it's being met with violence, sparking the same reaction out of protesters. He went on to say, "I don't agree with the looting and destroying of local businesses, but I also don't agree with the violence towards those peacefully protesting and the mentality of they loot, we shoot," which is referencing a tweet by President Donald Trump from last week. He also added, "Change isn't always a clean process, and we are going through it together. That's the only way it will change." And then ending with, "I refuse to say all cops are bad because that isn't true. But a checks and balances system that we can agree on is long overdue. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." That last part there is a well-known quote by a British historian, Lord Acton. Now, in direct response to the damage that happened over the weekend in downtown Cleveland, we are on a curfew here in this area, so we have the details for you on that right here. It's the downtown Central Business District and also Ohio City's Market District. All businesses are urged to close. That includes offices, as well as a ban on walking around and driving around. That's except for residents if you need to get food or take your dog out or go to see a doctor. Now, if you do drive in and out for work, you are going to need proof of residency. So keep that in mind, Betsy. We're basically back to only those essential activities happen, and a shutdown like this is something we had talked about happening again, but not under these circumstances.
Well, driving into work today, all of the exits surrounding downtown Cleveland on I-90, on the Shoreway, they are closed. You have to have ID. They will check you. I got stopped twice on blockades on my way into work. So they are definitely keeping this very, very locked down. So thanks for the report.
And proof of residency, too.
Yes, definitely. Appreciate it. Well, still ahead, we hear from the Michigan sheriff getting national attention for putting down his weapons and walking with protesters this weekend. And the officer charged with George Floyd's death is facing a third-degree murder charge. Our legal expert tells us how that is different from other murder charges. And tomorrow, the music industry will observe Blackout Tuesday. We break down what that means.
Yes, I can hear you. Check, check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Saturday, there were protests in downtown Cleveland. It started at the Free Stamp, chanting. Okay, you too. You too. Well, I'm sorry. Nice to hear you. I'm struggling over here. Oh, I was trying to cover up my curtain. Okay. Oh, okay. So you'll block out the curtains. Is this okay? All right. What was I about to do? Oh, see if I can look at.
And now, live from WKYC Studios, this is What's New.
And welcome back to What's New. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jay Crawford, coming to you still from my man cave, Studio J, Betsy, where Betsy Kling is back at our WKYC studios. Betsy, it is 5:30, and that means it is time for you to tell me something good, and this is great.
Hashtag TMSG. There you go. Tell me something good.
Absolutely.
Well, Jay, with so many violent protests taking place, we want to show you the ones that sparked unity instead of violence, like this one in Michigan.
You tell us what you need to do. Walk with us. 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 Let's walk with us.
Walk with us. That was the chant. I have goosebumps. It's exactly what Sheriff Christopher Swanson did in Genesee County, Michigan. He walked shoulder to shoulder with the protesters. He gave people high fives and fist bumps, and he asked the marchers for trust.
I mean, there's 800,000 cops in the United States. And when you see that, you can't justify that. And when I look at that, all the good that we do in a community, police officers across the nation can be destroyed in one act like that.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? Now, this is not the only place that happened. There are some other places, including here in Northeast Ohio, where the protesters and police officers all got together and actually marched together. So it's kind of an interesting, a divide that you can see, and hopefully things are going to start to come more and more together in the coming weeks.
Betsy, couldn't have said it better. You're right. This is a time where we desperately need leadership. We need it from somebody. And how about it coming from a sheriff in a county in Michigan? It's incredible in this time of conflict. Sometimes just the right words, just the right actions can not only lead to a stand down, but it can also lead to unification and looking for that common ground, which is what we need right now. He said, I'm taking my helmet off, I'm laying down my baton. It was a sign of trust. The protesters bought in. And you're right, that exact scene now is playing out in cities across America. Very good to see. All right, on to our top talker now here on this Monday afternoon at 5:30. The Minneapolis police officer arrested for George Floyd's death is now facing third-degree murder charge. It's a charge that isn't actually called third-degree murder in all states. We want to bring in our legal expert. You know her, you recognize her, Stephanie Haney. She's going to break down what the charge means exactly and why prosecutors decided to go with the third degree instead of murder 1 or murder 2. Stephanie, break it down for us if you could.
Well, Jay, as you can imagine, third-degree murder is easier to prove than first-degree murder, and it really all comes down to the mental element here. So that's probably why prosecutors went with this charge. It all comes down to proving the mental state that Derek Chauvin was in when George Floyd died. We have something similar here in Ohio. It's called involuntary or reckless manslaughter, and very similar to Minnesota. So under the charge in Minnesota, the prosecution doesn't have to prove intent or a plan to kill a specific person. A typical example of this would be if someone kills someone by firing a gun into a crowd or driving through a crowded sidewalk, but with no aim at a certain person. Chauvin is also charged with second-degree manslaughter, which can be satisfied if the prosecution can prove he acted negligently or not like a reasonable person would act, but still not that mental element there. Now, first-degree murder, on the other hand, that's a specific intent crime. So the prosecution would have to prove that Chauvin specifically intended to kill George Floyd, and then you risk not being able to prove that to a jury.
Stephanie, these are all murder charges, and some people are saying when you go to prison for murder, you're a murderer for life, and they're wondering what difference it makes if it's murder 1, murder 2, or murder 3. I would imagine it would be for the length of sentence that the convicted would eventually get.
That's exactly right, Jay. It all comes down to the amount of time you spend paying for the crime. Now, if we look at this, remember, no matter what happens here, George Floyd was given a death sentence, and that's not a possibility no matter what Chauvin is charged with in Minnesota, because they just don't have that. So for what he's charged with, Minnesota's sentencing guidelines recommend 12 and a half years for a conviction on the third-degree murder count and 4 years on the manslaughter charge. Now, as I said, Minnesota doesn't have the death sentence, so that means the harshest punishment for first-degree murder in Minnesota is life in prison. So for Chauvin, who's 44 years old, that's a big difference. It's the difference between getting out of prison in his 60s when you can have a real full life after that.
All right, Stephanie, thank you very much. It'll be interesting to see if the charges will be changed now that the second autopsy actually showed asphyxiation as the cause for Floyd's death. Stephanie, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
All right, we're going to continue on now and take a look at some of the other headlines making news here at the bottom of the hour. Russ Mitchell joins me again with that. Hi, Russ.
Hey, Betsy. A principal in Shaker Heights is pulling at a lot of people's heartstrings this afternoon. High school principal Eric Julia wrote a letter and recorded a message to the community that the building was marked with anti-police, anti-president sentiments. The graffiti also referred to America as America with 3 Ks. In his letter, he talked about being a parent of 2 white boys. He also talked about protecting his black students against police and watching officers work tirelessly to find students who perhaps have run off. He added that he wants to make school a place where everyone can feel safe. You can read that full letter at WKYC.com.
Hey, on behalf of Chief McCann, who cares about his community, we refuse to have a police brutality incident here.
A police officer in Lorain joined protesters this weekend and promised them that the department is dedicated to the community. In this video, the officer says the chief created a use of force advisory board. It will be headed by 2 African-American pastors who will review all police use of force. Now switching to coronavirus, here are the latest numbers of cases here in Ohio. We are up to 35,984 cases, a day-to-day increase of 471. That is 8 fewer than the day before. And that is all at 5:30. Betsy, I will see you here and about 20 feet away at 6 o'clock.
That's right. Lots more to come. Thanks,
Right.
Russ. Jay?
Betsy, thousands have shared a viral message about the app Healthy Together. The message claims the app is automatically sharing your personal contact information and all of your Facebook friends as well. We've had our Verify team checking it out. Here's Jason Puckett.
Let's start with the claim because we're seeing it thousands of times on Facebook. Quote, to all my contacts who intend to install this COVID-19 app Healthy Together, please delete me from your phone contact list and Facebook. It then claims the app will know all your contacts and Facebook friends. But is it true? We're verifying, will these apps automatically give your contacts and Facebook information to the developers? Our sources, the Utah state government, the CDC, and privacy policies from multiple apps. So first, what is Healthy Together? Well, it's a contact tracing app made on behalf of the Utah state government to monitor cases and alert people who come in contact with confirmed cases. And for most people, this is where we can stop this story, because Healthy Together is only available for Utah residents right now. If you're not in Utah, this doesn't apply to you, and this viral post doesn't either. But to break it down further, the app doesn't automatically share contacts, period. The Utah state government says the app will ask you if you want to share your phone contacts, but you can say no. And it doesn't access your Facebook information at all. We can verify the claims that the Healthy Together app automatically shares your contacts or Facebook information are false. Now, Apple and Google have also released their own versions of contact tracing. They use anonymous Bluetooth data to see what devices have been near each other, but they don't access any of the personal information on that device. If you've got more questions for us to look into, send us an email. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett.
Jason, thank you very much. Next at 5, our Tiffany Tarpley joins us. She's going to explain what it was like to be downtown Cleveland during Saturday's protests. That's next.
I know, I'm not.
George Floyd's death is having a major impact on our nation. People are calling for and demanding change. We've shown you videos from across the country and right here in Greater Cleveland and Northeast Ohio of the protests that have been happening. It's our job as the media to report that to you. And our Tiffany Tarpley was downtown Cleveland covering the protests on Saturday. So, Tiffany, I wondered if you would just take everybody back, kind of walk us through the events that happened on Saturday. Everything started off very peaceful. What was the atmosphere like?
It was a great atmosphere, honestly, Betsy. I mean, there were so many people there from all walks of life. They had their signs. They were ready. They were ready to protest what they believe is injustice. And so, there were times that they were chanting, about George Floyd, even about Tamir Rice here. They also chanted words, "I can't breathe." I mean, this was very much a peaceful protest, a peaceful gathering, people making sure that their voices were heard. They gathered at the Free Stamp downtown. And then at some point they marched down the street and they made their way toward the Justice Center. Even with that, it was a very powerful moment, I think, just to watch so many people coming together for one cause, it being a very positive situation. But there was a point where they got to the Justice Center. Things were going well. And then all of a sudden, people were at the entrance. And you heard noises. Me and my crew, Jim, my photographer, we stayed back a little bit because we wanted to be away from the crowd for safety reasons. I mean, not just because it's a protest, because of COVID-19 as well. But as we were at that distance, we started hearing banging and we really weren't sure what was going on. And then people started to run at some point. I ran too, not sure what was going on. But then they got back up to the door and you hear banging, you hear different things. And I was talking to protesters, like, what's going on up there? Why are people running? They said that they were throwing maybe fruit and water bottles. But long story short, Betsy, there was a point where more and more officers arrived, more and more law enforcement, and they started, came with their riot gear and they tried to move people back. And then the flashbangs started, the tear gas started. People ran for safety as well. It was a very intense, it was a long day. You saw people shattering cars, setting fire to police cars, to police vehicles. There was just so much going on out there that day. It was an emotional time. People kept asking me, how are you feeling? Are you okay? They were texting me, commenting, and I just said, physically, I'm doing well. But mentally, emotionally, it was tough to be in the middle of that, to be in the middle of, the positive part of that. And then to see it all turn, thankfully we are okay. Our crews are okay. But the big question now is, Betsy, of course, what's next? What do we do next? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at 6 o'clock.
Oh, I would look forward to hearing from that. You've already provided so much insight into all of this. I remember that piece that you did on Friday. I thought that was so beautiful. And I think it's so important to keep our message and the message of our community moving forward, too. Thanks, Tiffany. All right, we're going to... Sorry, Tiffany. We're going to change gears now. We're going to head off to weather. And Matt, of course, who's still hanging outside. It is like San Diego weather here in Northeast Ohio right now. Can you imagine being a forecaster somewhere where the weather is, quote, boring? They have their problems, too. But, we don't get these days very often.
Yeah, Betsy, I'm not interested in forecasting somewhere boring. I think we settled on Northeast Ohio, not just because it's home, but because of the wonderful weather year-round that we get, right? It is always just interesting. In fact, last month in May, we went from 30 degrees in spots to up to 90 in the matter of a month. And, we had snow last month, so that's just 1 month. Who knows what June's going to bring, but hopefully warmer temperatures. You're absolutely right. All right, well, the weather right now is just perfect. I mean, we've got clear skies across the area, some high clouds rolling in from the west that will create, I think, a beautiful sunset ahead of us. But temperatures and the humidity are very comfortable. We don't have a lot of humidity to deal with right now, but that is all going to change. Off to the west, we've got a warm front. Along that, we've got an area of showers and thunderstorms breaking out across areas of Wisconsin. This will move in here tonight. I'm not expecting a whole lot in terms of thunderstorms. We'll likely just get some rain off of that, and the best chance will be east of Cleveland, out towards Lake Geauga, County, as it looks right now. But the bigger picture, we've got a dome of heat out in the Plain States, as you'd expect this time of year. Along that dome of heat, you get what we call call ridge riders. It's these clusters of showers and storms that just blow up in the heating of the day and sometimes at night on the low-level jet, and they roll along where that ridge is, so they tend to curve. And that's exactly what we're going to be dealing with over the next couple days are some of these ridge riders, which come and go as they please. But for night, not a worry in sight. We've got temperatures that are in the 70s right now. I mentioned how dry that area is. Dew points in the 30s. That is very dry. As Betsy mentioned, boy, almost desert-like dry. We're out towards San Diego as well. But you can see the dew points out in the plains in the 60s. That's where the humidity is. And that humidity will build back in here the next 2 days. Tonight, though, clouds will increase. We will see some light rain develop out of those, perhaps moderate out towards the east as this cluster of storms begins to decay but moves into the area. Your National Design hour-by-hour forecast shows that. Most of the rain should fall tonight. I think we'll have some lingering showers perhaps around tomorrow morning, but the rest of the day should shape up pretty nicely. We're going to be on the warmer side of things, so temperatures ought to bump up into the 80s. You're going to notice that humidity increasing as well, but we should stay dry throughout your Tuesday. Wednesday, things start to change. We bring a cold front into the mix, so that has a thunderstorm chance pretty much from morning until evening. We'll have to see how these clusters of storms develop, but some of the storms on Wednesday, keep in mind, could be on the strong side, and that will set us up for a pretty nice looking Thursday around here. Universal Windows Direct 7-day forecast. There's your transition back to the nice weather on Thursday with the drier air. We do it all over again on Friday with showers and storms. But behind that, another breath of fresh air just in time for the weekend. At this point, Saturday and Sunday look sunny, drier, and less humid around the area. So we have a nice light at the end of the tunnel. But overall, we're dealing with a very summer-like pattern this week. Jay and Betsy.
Aw, thanks, Matt. We appreciate it. It's so nice to have some good weather to talk about. Certainly, I'm glad May is over with. Well, moving forward, as many of you know, Matt and his wife were expecting their third baby this summer, but we also have another new 3 News family member. Even though Mike Polk totally tried to steal the thunder and put all this out to everybody last week, we put the brakes on that. And Jay, you have some big news to share.
Did Mike share it last week? Really?
He totally let it out of the bag, and I told him to zip it. That wasn't his news to give. And so we said we're going to hold on to it. So we didn't give it all away. You obviously have many more details.
Well, you know I love Mike. That's fine. He was so excited for me. He couldn't wait. That's right, Betsy. Last Tuesday, I became a grandfather for the first time. And I have to tell you, there is nothing in the world that can wipe the smile off of my face. There she is, beautiful Hayes Marie. She was a big one, Betsy. 8 pounds, 8 ounces. How about that? Her mother, who was, of course, my first, Kirsten, was actually 9 pounds, 5 ounces. So I guess it runs in the family. She's just got this incredible full head of hair. She is absolutely precious. My wife traveled to New York City for the birth last week. She came back last night. She actually told me leaving my daughter and my granddaughter were the hardest thing she's ever had to do. It's just, it's a life-changing event, as exciting as it is to become a parent. And Betsy, you know that, and so many in our audience know that feeling. This is a completely different feeling. If it's possible, there's nothing that can eclipse the birth of your own child. It is right there, just a sliver below it. I can't wait to hug that baby. I'll get the opportunity in a couple of weeks, but it's a life-changing event, and not much can knock this smile off my face right now, Betsy.
Okay, so are you going to be grandpa, pop, papa, papa?
So that's a great question. I don't know. I actually put it out there on the air a couple of weeks ago asking for suggestions. I got a lot, all of those that you just mentioned. But I have to tell you, Betsy, I did get one that kind of piqued my interest. I thought it fit. It kind of works. I want to get your honest, unfiltered, which I know you will give me, opinion. J-pop. I thought it was okay. I didn't hate it. You do not like it.
J-pop.
I can't remember the woman's name who suggested it. I wish I could now. I'm sorry if you're watching.
You just can't be conventional. You've got to go all trendy.
No. Oh, no. I don't want to be trendy, and I don't want to be conventional. And here's the other thing. This is what I'm leaning more towards. I think it has to, Betsy, be organic. I really do. Like, whatever she decides to call me, that's what I will answer to. I'm excited, and I can't wait.
I love it. Thanks for sharing the news with us, Jay. We'll be right back.
Absolutely. There's the music. Time for Stephanie Haney to open the window to the world of entertainment in our daily pop break.
With great power comes great responsibility, and apparently no one knows that better than Josh Gad, who has started a YouTube channel dedicated to raising money for charity while reuniting cast members from popular films. This weekend, he brought the stars of Lord of the Rings together, and even the man, the myth, the legend himself stopped by.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
Yep, even Sir Ian McKellen joined in. They talked scenes, memes, and everything in between. Josh Gad is our hero. Offline, celebrities showed their support with feet on the ground at protests all across the country this weekend, with people seeking justice for the death of George Floyd. Tessa Thompson, Ariana Grande, J. Cole, Timothy Chalamet, and many more showed up and showed out in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. Cleveland native Machine Gun Kelly posted this pic on Instagram with the caption, "Justice soon," while model Emily Ratajkowski posted several pictures writing, "Dismantle power structures of oppression." The music industry is taking a different approach, going dark on Tuesday. Atlantic, Columbia, Sony, Warner, and other music groups publicly announced a blackout scheduled for June 2nd, pledging not to release any new music this week. Columbia Records said this is not a day off, but instead a day to reflect and figure out ways to move forward in solidarity. And Def Jam Records added, "We must use our voices to affect change. We must confront systematic racism." A day of silence in one way, but not so much in another way, because we all know money talks, right? And many of these organizations have also decided that they'll be donating to organizations that fight racial injustice and also empower the Black community, Jay. And I also have to say, since we're coming out of pop break here, you're thinking about going with J-pop, which I kind of love. Congratulations on your new granddaughter. Congratulations to the whole family. I think you should maybe consider Papa J.
Papa J works too. I like that as well. Stephanie, thank you very much for your kind words, and we will see you tomorrow. We're back to wrap up this edition of What's New right after this.
Hey, mic check. 1, 2, 3. Mic check, mic check, mic check. Good evening. I'm Laura Queso. Tonight we're talking about thank you.
Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
I witnessed a lot of this destruction firsthand, a lot of these windows getting shattered. Yes, how are you? Requesting interviews or request.
Thanks so much for watching What's New. We invite you to join us tomorrow at 5.
We definitely do. But right now, what matters most with Russ and Laura begins.
Hope and healing after a night of violence. But as the cleanup continues,
City Hall, they failed us.
Business owners questioning why the city was not more prepared for the riots and looting that sprung from peaceful protests. In the meantime, a curfew remains in effect until 8 o'clock tomorrow night. The National Guard on standby. There is much work to be done on two fronts: to wash away the remnants of the violence that erupted and to heal the racial divide across Northeast Ohio and our country.
Good evening to you. I'm Laura Queso.
And I'm Russ Mitchell. Tonight, tough questions